The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens as Charles William Hartwell adjusted his navy blazer for the third time. At 34, he had grown accustomed to the weight of expectations that came with being heir to one of England's most prestigious estates, but today felt different. Today his heart hammered against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Kate Morrison sat quietly on the stone bench near the rose garden, her fingers nervously smoothing the fabric of her cream-colored dress. She had arrived at Hartwell Manor 3 days ago as a guest of Charles's sister, never imagining that her life would change so dramatically. The estate stretched endlessly before her, its manicured lawns and ancient oak trees whispering stories of generations past. Charles had met Kate at his sister's art gallery opening in London 6 months earlier. Unlike the socialites and debutantes who usually surrounded him at such events, Kate possessed an authenticity that drew him like a moth to flame. She worked as a literature teacher at a small school in the countryside, her passion for books evident in the way her eyes lit up when discussing her favorite novels. That night they had talked until dawn about everything from Shakespeare to modern poetry, their conversation flowing as naturally as water finding its course. Now, as Charles walked through the familiar corridors of his childhood home, he could hear the distant sound of breakfast being served in the morning room. His mother, Lady Margaret Hartwell, had already expressed her disapproval of Kate's presence. The family had long expected Charles to marry within their social circle, preferably someone who could enhance their political and business connections. Kate represented something entirely different. Genuine love rather than strategic alliance. Camilla Blackwood had been the family's preferred choice for years. Daughter of a prominent banking family, she moved through high society with practiced ease, her connections spanning from Parliament to the royal court. Charles had dated Camilla on and off for nearly 2 years, their relationship more of a comfortable arrangement than a passionate romance. She understood the rules of their world, never questioning the traditions or expectations that came with marrying into the Hartwell legacy. Kate, however, challenged everything Charles thought he knew about love and duty. When she laughed, it was genuine and infectious. When she spoke about her students, her face glowed with purpose. She had never asked him about his wealth or title, instead wanting to know about his dreams, his fears, his hopes for the future. For the first time in his adult life, Charles felt seen as a person rather than a position. The previous evening had been particularly difficult. Camilla had arrived unexpectedly, claiming she needed to discuss urgent family matters with Charles's mother. But Kate had witnessed their conversation in the library, seeing how naturally Camilla fit into the family dynamics, how easily she navigated conversations about mutual acquaintances and shared interests. The contrast was stark and painful. As Charles approached the garden, he saw Kate's silhouette against the morning light. Her auburn hair caught the sun's rays, creating a halo effect that made her appear almost ethereal. She was reading, as she often did, completely absorbed in the world within the pages. This simple image crystallized everything for him. While others performed and positioned themselves for advantage, Kate simply existed in her authentic truth. He had spent the entire night wrestling with his decision. His family's pressure was immense, their arguments logical and well-reasoned. Camilla would ensure the family's continued prominence, would understand the sacrifices and compromises required of their position. She would never embarrass them at social functions or struggle to navigate the complex web of obligations that defined their lives. But as Charles watched Kate turn a page, completely unaware of his presence, he realized that choosing security over love would mean betraying everything he truly valued. His hands trembled as he reached into his jacket pocket, feeling the weight of his grandmother's engagement ring. The emerald had been in his family for 4 generations, traditionally passed to the heir's intended bride. Kate looked up as his footsteps crunched on the gravel path, her smile immediate and warm. She had no idea what was coming, no sense of the monumental decision he had wrestled with through the sleepless night. In her eyes he saw no calculation or expectation, only the gentle affection that had captured his heart 6 months ago. The morning air carried the scent of blooming jasmine and fresh grass, creating a perfect backdrop for what Charles knew would be one of the most important moments of his life. In the distance, he could hear the estate coming to life, gardeners beginning their work, kitchen staff preparing for the day's meals, the comfortable rhythm of a world that had remained unchanged for generations. But change was coming, whether his family was ready or not. As Charles took his first steps toward the bench where Kate waited, he felt the weight of tradition and expectation begin to lift from his shoulders. For once, he would choose with his heart rather than his head, regardless of the consequences that would surely follow. Charles sat beside Kate on the stone bench, the morning chill seeping through his clothes as he gathered his courage. The words he had rehearsed throughout the night seemed inadequate now, facing the woman who had unknowingly revolutionized his understanding of happiness. Kate closed her book and turned toward him, her green eyes reflecting concern at his obvious nervousness. "You seem troubled," she said softly, reaching out to touch his hand. Her fingers were warm despite the cool morning air, and Charles found himself marveling at how such a simple gesture could provide such comfort. "Did you sleep at all last night? You look exhausted." Before Charles could respond, the sound of footsteps on gravel interrupted the moment. Camilla appeared around the corner of the hedge maze, her black hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, her designer outfit impeccable as always. She moved with the confidence of someone who belonged in this world without question, her smile polite but clearly strained when she saw Kate. "Charles, darling." Camilla's voice carried the slight musical quality that had once charmed him at countless social gatherings. "Your mother mentioned you might be out here. I was hoping we could have that conversation we discussed last night." Her eyes flicked briefly to Kate before returning to Charles. "Privately, of course." Kate immediately began to stand, recognizing the social cue, but Charles gently pressed her hand to keep her seated. The gesture was small but significant, and all three of them understood its meaning. Camilla's eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly, her composure wavering for just a moment. "Actually, Camilla, I'm glad you're here," Charles said, his voice steadier than he felt. "There's something important I need to say, and perhaps it's better that you hear it directly from me rather than through family gossip later." The garden around them seemed to hold its breath. Kate looked confused, glancing between Charles and Camilla as she began to understand that she had walked into the middle of something much larger than a casual morning conversation. Camilla's face had gone pale, but her training in social situations kept her expression carefully neutral. Charles reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew the emerald ring. Kate gasped softly, recognizing immediately what it represented even if she didn't understand the full implications. The emerald caught the morning light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the stone bench between them. "Kate Morrison," Charles said, turning to face her fully. "6 months ago, you changed everything I thought I knew about love. You've shown me what it means to connect with someone's soul rather than their social standing. You've made me laugh in ways I had forgotten were possible, challenged my thinking, and made me want to be a better man." Camilla's sharp intake of breath was audible, but Charles continued, his focus entirely on Kate. "I know this world isn't what you're used to. I know my family can be overwhelming, and the expectations that come with being part of our lives are significant. But I also know that I would rather face every challenge life brings with you by my side than live comfortably without you." Kate's eyes filled with tears as Charles dropped to one knee on the gravel path. The tiny stones pressed into his leg through his trousers, but the discomfort seemed insignificant compared to the magnitude of the moment. "Will you marry me, Kate? Will you take this journey with me, whatever it brings?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Kate stared at the ring, then at Charles's hopeful face, then finally at Camilla, who stood frozen like a beautiful statue. The weight of the decision was enormous, not just for Kate, but for everyone present. This wasn't simply a proposal. It was Charles publicly choosing love over duty, authenticity over convenience. Camilla found her voice first. "Charles, you can't be serious. We've talked about this. Your family expects. We've been planning." Her usual composed facade cracked slightly, revealing genuine hurt beneath the social polish. "This is completely impulsive. You're throwing away everything stable and sensible for a fantasy." "It's not a fantasy, Camilla," Charles replied gently but firmly, not rising from his position. "What we had was comfortable, yes, but it wasn't love. Not the kind that makes you excited to wake up each morning, or gives you someone you want to share every thought with. You deserve that kind of love too, even if it's not with me." Kate's hand covered her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. The magnitude of what Charles was offering, and what he was giving up to offer it, overwhelmed her. She understood now why Camilla was here. why the family had seemed so formal with her, why there had been subtle tensions she couldn't quite identify. I need to understand what this means, Kate whispered. For you, for your family. I can't accept something this important without knowing the full cost. Charles's heart swelled with love for her careful consideration, even in this emotional moment. This was exactly why he had chosen her. Kate thought of others even when making the biggest decision of her life. She wouldn't accept his proposal without considering how it would affect everyone around them. The morning sun had climbed higher, warming the garden and highlighting the tears glistening on all three faces. In the distance, they could hear the estate continuing its daily rhythm, unaware that everything was about to change forever. The emerald ring remained nestled in its small velvet box, waiting for an answer that would reshape multiple lives. Camilla stepped closer, her voice softer now but no less urgent. Kate, you seem lovely, but you don't understand what you'd be taking on. This family has obligations that span generations. There are expectations, traditions, social requirements that will consume your entire life. Are you really prepared for that kind of sacrifice? Kate looked at Camilla with newfound understanding, recognizing the pain behind her composed exterior. This wasn't just about social expectations or family duty. Camilla genuinely cared for Charles, and seeing him propose to another woman was clearly devastating her. The complexity of the situation weighed heavily on Kate's shoulders as she struggled with the magnitude of the decision before her. You're right, Kate said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't fully understand what this world requires. I teach children about literature in a small village school. I've never attended a state dinner or navigated the kind of social obligations you're talking about. She looked down at Charles, still kneeling patiently on the gravel, his eyes full of hope and love. But I do understand what it means to love someone enough to learn, to grow, to become whatever version of myself is needed. Camilla's expression softened slightly, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit in Kate's honesty. It's not just about learning protocol or which fork to use at dinner, she continued, her voice gaining strength. It's about every decision being scrutinized, every friendship questioned for ulterior motives, every private moment potentially becoming public knowledge. The pressure never stops, Kate. Never. Charles finally rose from his kneeling position but kept the ring box open in his hands. Camilla's not wrong about the challenges, he said, his honesty surprising both women. But she's describing a life where duty comes before everything else, where personal happiness is secondary to public image. I've lived that way for 34 years and I can't do it anymore. The sound of approaching footsteps caused all three to turn. Lady Margaret Hartwell emerged from behind the hedge maze, her expression stern and purposeful. She was dressed impeccably as always, her silver hair perfectly styled, her bearing regal despite the early hour. Charles's sister, Eleanor, followed close behind, her face a mixture of curiosity and concern. Charles. Lady Margaret's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I believe we need to discuss this situation before it progresses any further. Her gaze swept over the scene. The engagement ring, Kate's tear-stained face, Camilla's obvious distress. Eleanor mentioned she saw you heading to the garden with obvious purpose. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice gentler than her mother's. Charlie, we just want to make sure you've thought this through completely. Marriage isn't just about two people. It affects entire families, especially in our position. Kate stood up from the bench, feeling suddenly small under the scrutiny of Charles's family. The weight of their combined attention was overwhelming, and she began to understand exactly what Camilla had meant about constant scrutiny. This was just the beginning, and already she felt like she was drowning in expectations and implications she barely comprehended. I appreciate everyone's concern, Charles said firmly, stepping closer to Kate in a gesture of protection and support. But this isn't a decision I've made lightly. Kate and I have spent months getting to know each other, talking about our hopes and dreams, our values and beliefs. She's not some passing fancy or rebellion against family expectations. Lady Margaret's eyes fixed on Kate with laser intensity. Miss Morrison, may I ask what you hope to gain from this arrangement? Surely you understand that marrying into our family would require significant adjustments to your current lifestyle and ambitions. The question hung in the air like a sword. Kate felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. The implication was clear. Lady Margaret suspected her of being a fortune hunter, someone seeking to elevate her social status through marriage. The accusation cut deeply because it reduced her genuine feelings for Charles to mere opportunism. "I hope to gain a lifetime with the man I love," Kate replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm not interested in your money or title, Lady Margaret. I fell in love with Charles before I even knew his last name. I came to that art gallery opening with your daughter because I enjoy supporting local artists, not because I was hunting for a wealthy husband." Camilla watched this exchange with fascination, perhaps seeing Kate in a new light. Despite her obvious nervousness, Kate was standing her ground with dignity, not cowering under the family's intimidating presence. There was something admirable about her refusal to be dismissed or diminished. "The heart wants what it wants," Eleanor said softly, earning a sharp look from her mother. "Sometimes love doesn't follow the logical path we've planned for it." Charles reached for Kate's hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture of unity. "I've already made my choice," he declared, his voice carrying new strength. "The question isn't whether Kate is suitable for our family. It's whether our family is ready to embrace someone who will love and support me unconditionally, even if she doesn't come with the pedigree you prefer." The tension in the garden was palpable. Lady Margaret's face had grown increasingly stern, while Camilla stood silently processing the complete collapse of her expected future. Eleanor looked torn between supporting her brother and maintaining family harmony. Kate felt like she was standing at the center of a storm, buffeted by forces beyond her control. "Charles," Lady Margaret said finally, her voice dangerously quiet, "if you proceed with this rash decision, you must understand the consequences. The family board will not support leadership that prioritizes personal desires over institutional stability. Your inheritance, your position as heir, everything we've prepared you for since birth, all of it will be in jeopardy." The ultimatum hung heavy in the morning air. This was no longer just about choosing between two women. It was about choosing between love and legacy, between personal happiness and generational responsibility. Kate's face went pale as she finally understood the true cost of Charles's proposal. He wasn't just asking her to marry him, he was potentially sacrificing everything his family had built for generations. Kate felt the blood drain from her face as the full weight of Lady Margaret's words settled over the garden like a dark cloud. She had known that marrying Charles would bring challenges, but she had never imagined that her acceptance could cost him his entire inheritance, his family legacy, everything he had been raised to protect and preserve. The emerald ring in Charles's hand suddenly felt less like a symbol of love and more like a weapon that could destroy generations of family history. "Mother, you can't be serious," Eleanor gasped, breaking the tense silence. "Charles is your son, your heir. Surely the family wouldn't actually disinherit him over his choice of wife." But even as she spoke, Eleanor's voice carried uncertainty, as if she too was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Lady Margaret's expression remained unmoved, carved from stone like the ancient statues that dotted the estate grounds. The Hartwell legacy has survived 4 centuries through careful planning and strategic alliances, not romantic impulses. The Board of Trustees has specific expectations about leadership and the continuation of our family's influence. They will not accept a daughter-in-law who cannot contribute to our political and social standing. Camilla stepped forward, her earlier hurt now replaced by something that looked almost like pity. "Charles, please listen to your mother. This isn't just about tradition or snobbery. It's about responsibility. Our families have built something significant together over generations. Think about all the charities we fund, the scholarships we provide, the political influence we wield for good causes. Are you really willing to jeopardize all of that?" Charles's grip on Kate's hand tightened, but she could feel his fingers trembling. The weight of his family's arguments was clearly affecting him, even though his love for her remained strong. Kate watched his face as he processed the implications of his choice, seeing the boy who had been raised to put duty before self-warring with the man who had finally found genuine happiness. "I need a moment," Kate said suddenly, gently extracting her hand from Charles's grasp. "This is all happening so fast and I can't think clearly with everyone watching me." She looked around the circle of faces, each representing different pressures and expectations. "Could I have some time alone to process everything that's been said?" "Of course," Charles said immediately, concern evident in his voice. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." Kate walked toward the rose garden, her steps unsteady as she tried to process the enormity of what was being asked of her. Behind her, she could hear the family beginning to argue in hushed but intense tones. Eleanor was defending Charles's right to choose his own happiness, while Lady Margaret maintained that personal desires must sometimes be sacrificed for the greater good. Camilla's voice joined the discussion, though Kate couldn't make out her exact words. Finding a secluded bench hidden among the climbing roses, Kate sat down and allowed herself to truly think for the first time since Charles had pulled out the ring. She loved him deeply, that much was certain. Their connection was genuine and profound, unlike anything she had ever experienced. But was her love worth the destruction of everything he had been raised to protect and continue? She thought about her simple life in the village, teaching children who looked up to her with bright, eager faces. Her small cottage with its overgrown garden and towers of books stacked on every surface. The freedom to spend her evenings reading by the fireplace or taking long walks through the countryside without worrying about photographers or social obligations. That life would disappear completely if she accepted Charles's proposal. But more troubling was the realization that Charles might lose everything that defined him. Without his inheritance and family support, who would he become? Would he resent her years later when the reality of their situation fully settled? Would their love survive the pressure of financial stress and social exile from everything he had known since childhood? The sound of footsteps on gravel interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Camilla approaching alone. Her earlier hostility replaced by something that looked almost like compassion. The other woman sat beside her on the bench without invitation, both of them staring at the roses in contemplative silence. "I owe you an apology," Camilla said finally. "I've been treating you like an enemy when you're simply a woman who fell in love with the same man I care about. That's not your fault, and it's not something you should be punished for." Kate looked at her in surprise. "You don't need to apologize. I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you." Camilla laughed softly, but there was no humor in the sound. "You know what the strangest part is? Watching Charles with you, seeing how he lights up when you laugh or how he hangs on every word when you talk about your students. I realized I've never inspired that kind of joy in him. We were comfortable together, compatible in all the right ways, but we were never truly happy." The admission hung between them, honest and painful. Kate felt a surge of sympathy for this woman who had just lost not only her expected future, but also the illusion that she had been truly loved. "I think," Camilla continued, her voice gaining strength, "that maybe your love for him is worth more than all our careful planning and strategic alliances. Maybe what Charles needs isn't someone who fits perfectly into his existing life, but someone who makes him want to build a completely new one." Kate stared at Camilla in amazement. "Are you saying you think I should accept his proposal?" "I'm saying that love like what you two share is rare and precious. The question isn't whether you're worthy of Charles or his family legacy. It's whether you're both strong enough to create something entirely new together, even if it means walking away from everything that came before." In the distance, they could hear voices growing more heated as the family argument continued. Lady Margaret's imperious tone clashed with Eleanor's emotional pleas, while Charles's deeper voice tried to mediate between them. The future hung in the balance, waiting for Kate's decision to tip the scales toward love or duty, risk or security, the unknown or the predetermined path. Kate returned to the garden with newfound clarity, Camilla walking beside her in an unexpected show of solidarity. The family argument had grown more intense in their absence, with Eleanor now openly confronting her mother about the harshness of her ultimatum. Charles stood apart from them, his face a mask of controlled emotion as he watched for Kate's return. "I've made my decision," Kate announced, her voice cutting through the heated discussion. All conversation stopped immediately, every pair of eyes turning toward her with anticipation and anxiety. The emerald ring still gleamed in Charles's open palm, catching the midday sunlight like a beacon of possibility. Lady Margaret straightened her shoulders, preparing for either victory or defeat. Eleanor held her breath, clearly hoping for her brother's happiness, but fearing her mother's reaction. Charles stepped forward, his entire future hanging on Kate's next words. "Charles," Kate said, looking directly into his eyes, "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. These past 6 months have shown me what true partnership means, what it feels like to find someone who sees and values the real me, not just the surface presentation." Charles's face began to brighten with hope, but Kate held up her hand to indicate she wasn't finished. "But I cannot accept your proposal under these circumstances," she continued, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I won't be the reason you lose your family, your inheritance, or everything you've worked to build. That kind of sacrifice would poison our love eventually, no matter how strong it is today." The silence that followed was deafening. Charles's face crumpled with devastation, while Lady Margaret's expression shifted to something that might have been relief mixed with surprise at Kate's selflessness. Eleanor covered her mouth with her hands, clearly torn between admiration for Kate's noble gesture and heartbreak for her brother's obvious pain. "Kate, no," Charles said, his voice breaking. "You're not the reason for anything. This is my choice, my decision to make. I don't care about the inheritance or the board or any of it if it means losing you. But I care," Kate replied firmly. "I care because I love you enough to want you to have both, your family's love and our relationship. I care because walking away from centuries of family legacy isn't something you can undo later if you change your mind." Camilla stepped forward unexpectedly, her voice clear and determined. What if there was another way? All eyes turned to her in surprise. Lady Margaret looked particularly startled, as if she had forgotten Camilla was present during this family crisis. "What do you mean?" Eleanor asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. Camilla took a deep breath before continuing. "I mean, what if the real problem isn't Kate herself, but the way we're approaching this entire situation? Lady Margaret, you're concerned about the family's political and social standing, correct? About maintaining influence and continuing charitable work?" Lady Margaret nodded cautiously, unsure where this conversation was heading. "Then perhaps we should consider what Kate actually brings to the table instead of focusing only on what she lacks," Camilla continued. "She's an educator with a genuine passion for helping children. She understands literature and arts. She connects with people from all social backgrounds because she sees them as individuals rather than networking opportunities." Charles looked at Camilla with growing amazement, unable to believe she was advocating for his relationship with Kate after everything that had happened. "Those aren't exactly the qualifications the board expects," Lady Margaret said skeptically. "No, but they might be exactly what the family needs to evolve," Eleanor interjected, warming to Camilla's line of thinking. "Think about it, Mother. Our charitable foundation focuses heavily on education initiatives. Kate could bring authentic insight into what those programs actually accomplish. She could help us move beyond writing checks to making real impact." Kate listened to this conversation with growing wonder. These women were reimagining her role, not as someone who needed to be molded to fit existing expectations, but as someone who could help reshape those expectations entirely. "I'm not saying it would be easy," Camilla added. "Kate would still need to learn about protocol and social obligations. But instead of requiring her to abandon everything she cares about, why not find ways to integrate her passions with family responsibilities?" Lady Margaret was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing this unexpected perspective. "The board expects tradition," she said finally, but her voice carried less certainty than before. "The board expects results," Eleanor corrected gently. "They want the family influence to continue growing and making positive impact. If Kate can contribute to that goal while also making Charles genuinely happy, wouldn't that be the best possible outcome?" Charles stepped closer to Kate, hope beginning to replace the devastation on his face. "Kate, would you consider a compromise? What if we could find a way to honor both our love and family responsibilities? What if marrying me didn't mean giving up teaching but expanding it? What if we could use the family resources to create educational programs that you could develop and oversee?" Kate looked around at the faces surrounding her. Lady Margaret's cautious reconsideration, Eleanor's encouraging smile, Camilla's unexpected support, and Charles's desperate hope. The impossible situation was slowly transforming into something that might actually be possible. "I would need time," Kate said carefully. "Time to understand what I'd really be taking on, to see if I could genuinely contribute rather than just adapt. And I'd need to know that your family could accept me not as a replacement for their original plans, but as a different kind of addition to them. And I would need to know," she continued, looking directly at Lady Margaret, "that Charles wouldn't lose his inheritance or position regardless of my decision. This choice has to be about love and partnership, not financial survival. Lady Margaret studied Kate with new interest, perhaps seeing for the first time the strength and wisdom that had captured her son's heart. The morning had evolved from a simple proposal to a complex negotiation about family values, tradition, and the possibility of change. The garden around them seemed to hold its breath as she weighed her response. "You surprise me, Miss Morrison," Lady Margaret said finally. "Most people in your position would have either accepted immediately for the obvious benefits or fled entirely from the complications. Instead, you're thinking about what's best for everyone involved, including people you barely know." Eleanor moved closer to her mother, sensing an opportunity for reconciliation. "Kate's approach is exactly what we need, Mother. Instead of choosing between tradition and progress, she's looking for ways to honor both." Charles remained focused on Kate, understanding that this moment would define not just their relationship, but the kind of partnership they might build together. "Whatever conditions or timeline you need," he said quietly, "I'll respect your decision. But please don't let fear of the unknown keep us apart if you truly believe we can make this work." Camilla cleared her throat softly, drawing attention back to herself. "If I may, I'd like to make a proposal of my own." She looked around the group before continuing. "I suggest we arrange a trial period, 3 months where Kate spends time learning about family obligations, while also developing her ideas for educational initiatives. Let her see what this life really requires and let the family see what she can genuinely contribute." Kate felt a surge of gratitude toward Camilla, who was essentially offering her a graceful way to explore this new possibility, without the pressure of immediate commitment. "That seems incredibly generous considering everything you've been through today." "I'm beginning to think," Camilla said with a sad but genuine smile, "that my resistance was more about losing the future I had planned than losing Charles specifically. Watching you two together, seeing how you bring out the best in each other, it's helped me realize I deserve that kind of connection too, just not with him." Lady Margaret nodded slowly. "A trial period has merit. It would allow us to address the board's concerns gradually, while giving you time to develop concrete proposals for expanding our educational outreach. Eleanor could help you navigate the social requirements, and I could introduce you to the key players in our charitable network. And if, at the end of 3 months, you decide this life isn't for you," Charles added, "you'll know you made an informed choice rather than an emotional reaction to family pressure." Kate looked down at the emerald ring still waiting in Charles's hands. The stone seemed to glow with its own inner light, representing not just a romantic gesture but a bridge between 2 different worlds. "I have conditions of my own," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "Name them," Charles said immediately. "First, I continue teaching at my school during this trial period. I need to maintain that connection to who I am while I'm exploring who I might become. Second, any educational initiatives we develop must have real impact, not just good publicity. I want to visit schools, talk to teachers and students, understand what actually works before we commit family resources." Eleanor clapped her hands together softly. "Those are perfect conditions. They show you're serious about contributing meaningfully rather than just adapting to our expectations. And third," Kate continued, "at the end of 3 months, Charles and I make our decision about marriage based on what we've learned together, not on family pressure from either direction. If we decide to marry, it's because we believe we can build something beautiful and meaningful together. If we decide it won't work, everyone agrees to part as friends with no hard feelings or sense of failure." Lady Margaret extended her hand toward Kate in a gesture that seemed both formal and genuinely warm. "Those terms are entirely reasonable and speak well of your character. I believe we may have misjudged you initially, Miss Morrison." As Kate shook Lady Margaret's hand, she felt Charles step closer behind her. "Does this mean you'll consider my proposal seriously?" he asked, hope evident in every word. Kate turned to face him, seeing not just the man she loved but the partner she might become. "Charles William Hartwell," she said with a smile that matched his own, "ask me again in 3 months, and I promise to give you an answer based on everything we've learned about building a life together." Charles closed the ring box with a soft snap, but his smile suggested he saw this as a beginning rather than an ending. 3 months, he agreed. 3 months to show you that love and duty don't have to be opposites, that we can honor tradition while writing our own story. Camilla moved toward the manor house, pausing to look back at the group with something like peace on her face. "I think I'll be heading back to London today. This family has some planning to do, and I have my own future to reconsider." As she walked away, Eleanor linked arms with both Kate and Charles. "I have a feeling these are going to be the most interesting 3 months our family has had in generations." The garden fell quiet except for the soft sound of wind through the roses and the distant call of birds. Greeting the full arrival of day, Kate felt the weight of possibility settling over her like a warm shawl, daunting but no longer frightening. Whatever the next 3 months brought, she would face them with honesty, courage, and hope for a future that honored both love and responsibility. In the distance, the estate continued its timeless rhythm, but something fundamental had shifted. Tradition and progress were no longer enemies but potential partners, and love had proven stronger than fear. The emerald ring waited patiently for its moment, but the real treasure, understanding, respect, and genuine affection between two families, had already been discovered in the morning light of the rose garden.